Let's begin as always this morning on Parashat Ekev, and let's begin by standing and offering Matovu. If you're comfortable standing, otherwise begin the service together anyway. Let's read together the foot of page 122. I feel there's always something particular about August Shabbatot and our community together. Eternal God, we come before you surrounded by members of our community. With them we share our happiness and it becomes greater, our troubles and they become smaller. May we never be too mean to give nor too proud to receive, for in giving and receiving we discover you and begin to understand the meaning of life. Let us not separate ourselves from the true strength of our community, the experience and wisdom of old people, the hopes of the young, and the examples of care and courage which sustain us. Give us an open mind and a generous heart to welcome those who need us and to admit your presence into our daily life. Baruch atah Adonai. Eloheinu melech haolam, ozeh Yisrael bikvora. We should revere God in all that we do, privately as well as publicly, acknowledge the truth and speak it in our hearts. Ribon kol haolamim, lo al sitkotenu anachnu mapilim, tachanunenu lefanecha, ki al rachamecha harabim. Ma anachnu, me chayenu, ma chastenu, ma Yeshuatenu. For what are we? What is our life? What our piety? What our goodness? What our strength? What can we say in your presence, eternal God? Are not the mightiest of us as nothing before you, the famous as though they had never lived, the learned as if they had no knowledge, the wise as if without understanding? For most of what we do is futile, and our life on earth is but a span. Our superiority over other animals amounts to little, for all is vanity. Nevertheless, we are your people, children of your covenant, called to your service. Therefore, it is right we should thank and praise you, proclaim your holiness, and daily say before you,
Ashrenu, Matov, Matov, Matov Chelkeinu. Ashrenu, Matov, Matov, Matov Chelkeinu. Manayim, Manayim, Manayim Goralenu. Manayim, Manayim, Manayim Goralenu. Manayim, Manayim, Manayim Goralenu. Manayim, Manayim, Manayim Goralenu. Umayava, 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 Yerushalayim Ashrenu. Umayava, 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 Yerushalayim Ashrenu.
Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam baruch hu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, hamchulal b'fi amo, meshubach umfa'ar b'shon chasidav v'avadav, b'shvachot u'vizmorot, legadelcha v'namlichecha, malkeinu yachid chei ha'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai melech mechulal b'tishbachot. And from Solomon ibn Gibberol, this piyut, this hymn to God written in the 11th century in Spain. At dawn and dusk I seek you, reach out and look to you. With soul athirst I yearn for you. I am a beggar at your door. The galaxies cannot contain you, yet you dwell in my inmost being. I hold your glory in my heart. My love for you exceeds my speech. So I will praise your name, Eternal One, as long as your breath of life remains within me. Foot of page 125.
Nishmat kol chai, tevarech et shemcha, Adonai Eloheinu, Ruach kol basar, tevaeh utromei, zichrecha malkeinu tamid, mir haolam ve'ad haolam, ata el, ata el.
Elohei harishonim v'ha'achronim, Eloha kol briot, Adon kol toladot, hamchulal barov hatishbachot, hamnaheg olamo b'chesed uvriotav b'rachamim, lacha levadacha, anachnu modim. Yet though our mouths should overflow with song as the sea, our tongues with exultation as the roaring waves, and our lips with praise as heaven's wide expanse, and though our eyes shine as the sun and moon, our arms spread forth like the wings of eagles, and our feet speed swiftly as hinds, still we could not fully thank you, eternal God, for your infinite kindness to our ancestors and to us. Therefore, the limbs you have formed in us, the spirit you've breathed into us, and the tongue you have set in our mouths, all shall unite to thank and praise, extol you and exalt you, the sovereign God. Every mouth shall thank you, every tongue bear witness to you, every knee shall bend to you, every body bow down to you, every heart shall revere you, and every fiber of our being shall sing your praise. For so it is written, all my bones shall say, who is like you, eternal one? Therefore we extol you and proclaim your glory and praise your holy name, as it is said, praise the eternal one, O my soul. Let all that is within me praise God's holy name. And we offer a few lines from Psalm 100 now. Worship God with joy. Page 128, Yishtabach, let's stand.
Yishtabach Shimcha La'at Malkeinu Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol VaHaKadosh B'Shamayim u'Ba'aretz Ki Lecha Na'eh Adonai Eloheinu Ve'Elohei Avoteinu Shir u'Shvacha Halel v'Zimra Brachot v'Hodaot Me'ata ve'ad olam Baruch atah Adonai Habocher b'shirei Zimra.
Page 135, the Baruch Hu.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Ha'mevorach. Baruch Adonai Ha'mevorach le'olam va'ed.
Let's sit down. We're on page 136. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzei or uvorei choshech oseh shalom uvorei et hakol hameir la'aretz l'darim aleha barachamim uvtuvo machadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reishit ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai kulam b'chochma asita melach ha'aretz kinyanecha titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shevach ma'aseh yadecha v'al morei or she'asita Yefaruch Hasela, Baruch Atah Adonai, Yotzeh Amorot. And together in English, great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching. Make us faithful to your commandments and wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you and proclaim your unity. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher bi'amo Yisrael bi'ahava. Shema, stand, sit, as feels right for you. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Amen.
V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavecha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol modecha. V'hayu hadvarim ha'ele, asher anochi metzavaha hayom al levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam, v'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'leftecha v'derech u'v'shokbecha u'kumecha, u'kashatam la'ot al yadecha, v'hayu letotafot beinenecha, u'katavtam al muzot betecha u'visharecha.
Leman tizkaru va'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'hitem kedoshim Elohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim להיות לכם אלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Together, good and beautiful and true, sound, established and enduring are these words now and forever. True it is, Eternal One, that you are our sovereign God and Redeemer, as you were the God and Redeemer of our ancestors. You are our Maker, the rock of our salvation. We have known you always as our helper and our liberator. There is no God but you. Truly you are first and you are last. We have no Redeemer but you. You redeemed us from Egypt. You freed us from the house of bondage. Then with great joy, Moses, Miriam, and all Israel together sang to you this song.
Ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osefet.
Shira Hadasha Shipchu Gulim, L'Shimcha Sfat Hayam, Yachad, Kulam, Hodu, V'himlichu Va'amru.
Adonai Imlo Leolam Va'ed. To Yisrael, Kuma Be'ezrat Yisrael, Bo Aleinu Adonai Tzvaot Shemo, Bo Aleinu Adonai Tzvaot Shemo, Kadosh Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai, God Yisrael.
And let's stand together.
Adonai, Sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, Sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, V'hanora, El Elyon. Gomel Hasadim Tovim V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chastei Avot V'imahot, U'mevii Gula Livnei V'neihem, L'ma'an Shemo B'Yahava, Melech Ozeh U'Moshiach Magen, Baruch Ata Adonai, Magen Avraham Vezrat Sarah. Ata Gibor Leolam Adonai, Machaye Metim Ata Rav Lahoshia, Mashiv HaRuach U'Morid HaGeshem, Mazriach HaShemesh U'Morid HaTam.
מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצליח ישועה.
ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך.
קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו.
כבודו מלא עולם,
ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו.
ממקומך מלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לך.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי את ציון, לבדו, הללויה. לטובתו, לטובתו נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. לטובתו, לטובתו, לטובתו נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. השיבך אלוהינו, מפינו לא יחוש לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול, כי אל מלך גדול, הקדוש ברוך הוא. לטובתו, לטובתו, לטובתו נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש.
Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el, HaKadosh. So you inspired our ancestors to hallow this day for your service. And when upon its coming we pause to contemplate our life, we learn anew we do not live by bread alone, but also by the spiritual nourishment we receive when we open ourselves to your influence. We thank you for this Shabbat, for the opportunity it offers to enhance the quality of our lives. We thank you for its joy and for its peace. May our worship help us to take into our hearts its message of holiness and consecrate and dedicate all our days by devotion to what is true, beautiful, and good.
Shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha. Shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Makadashei sheli Shabbat. Kulam yisma'u v'yitamru Shabbat, Yismachu b'malachutacha. Shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha. Shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. V'hashvi'i ratzita bo Shabbat, Emdat Yamim, Orto Karata Shabbat, Yismachu b'malachutacha. Shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha. Shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei
Baruch Ata Adonai Makadesh HaShabbat. V'tzei Adonai Eloheinu b'yamcha Yisrael, u'tefilatam b'ahava tekabel, u'tehi l'ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha. Baruch Ata Adonai she'otecha levadecha b'yira na'avod. And together, modim anachnu lach, שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו לעולם ועד. צור חיינו, מגן ישנו, אתה הוא לדור ודור. נודה לך מספר תהילתך, על חיינו המסורים בידיך, ועל נשמותינו הפקודות לך. ועל ניסיך שבכל יום עמנו, ועל נפלותיך וטובותיך שבכל עת ערב ובוקר וצהריים. ברוך אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך, ולך נאה להודות.
Sim shalom, sim shalom, tova u'bracha, deim v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol ha'amim. Sim shalom, sim shalom.
Grant peace, welfare, and blessing, grace, love, and mercy to us and to all the house of Israel, your people. As a loving parent, bless us with the light of your presence, By the light of your presence, eternal God, you have revealed to us the law of life, a love of kindness and righteousness, blessing and mercy, life and peace. For it is good in your sight that your people Israel and all peoples be blessed at all times with your gift of peace. Baruch atah Adonai, Oseh HaShalom. So just for us to take our moment for silent prayer, for reflection, for a time to be with ourselves.
Say shalom bimroma, Huya say shalom aleinu, Be'al kol Yisrael, Be'al kol bnei Adam. Say shalom bimroma, Huya say shalom aleinu, Be'al kol Yisrael, Be'al kol bnei Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Israel.
Thank you, Dean and Franklin. We almost didn't recognize each other yesterday. We haven't played and led service together for quite a while. I was just motioning to Dahlia because I would really like to speak before the Torah service today, because I want to give you the opportunity to hear Torah in a different way after having thought about these things. So it seems, if okay with all of you, I'm just switching the order. So last night I shared a lovely anecdote that I just cannot resist sharing again this morning as I talk about gratitude and life. The story goes that Samuel Beckett, the playwright, not known for his high mood all the time, was walking on a spring morning with a friend who said, "Look at the sunshine, look at this, doesn't a day like this make you happy to be alive?" To which Beckett responded, "I wouldn't go quite that far." So that anecdote was shared by Dr. Oliver Sacks. I have been reading his essays, as I said last night, on gratitude this week and on his way of appreciating his life. He writes about the gift of time and the living that he was able to do after the diagnosis he was given of ocular cancer. 9 extra years of life which he held on to fast. And on the eve of turning 80, he reached for the number and substance on the periodic table, gold, and celebrated becoming gold, and wrote this little book of essays. Sacks, and we know what an extraordinary writer and indeed physician and man he was, he wrote about second chances, about outliving predictions, which in turn changed his attitude to life and his opportunities to do and redo again and again. Last week, as we went into our Erev Shabbat service, we were gripped to the news of the attack on Salman Rushdie after all those years of keeping him safe. And now perhaps we are equally gripped by his survival and recovery, and that sense that yet he still rises. I'm drawn to Maya Angelou's devastating poem, "And Still I Rise," that reminds us of the power of recovery, of resilience, and of going on. Rabbi Alan Liu writes in his wonderful book that I turn to at this time of year, "This is real and you are incredibly unprepared, the journey of the High Holy Days." He writes about Sigmund Freud being, in his opinion, the most important person in the 19th and 20th century, way more than Einstein. Why, he says? Because he taught the world to be ready for the invisible. And it was only the understanding that the invisible can at times be more important than the visible that gave rise to many other wrestlings with science. For all Freud's animus, wrote Liu, against Judaism, his idea was an extremely Jewish one. In fact, it may not be too much to suggest that it is the Jewish idea, that Judaism came into the world to bring the news that the invisible is more important than the visible, and that we have in our lives tenacity and courage when we try again and again in our lives, and that tenacity and courage is not always visible. The human heart is taken by the idea of second chances, of perseverance, and our Torah, the watchword, the scripture of our Jewish life, knew this and feeds us today this sweet message about having another go. This resolve, this being ready for failure and mistakes, is part of the way we have of being conscious. It's quiet, it's hidden, it's hard to acknowledge at times, but it is there strong and steely. Details are given that we're about to hear of how in this portion a description is made of how the Israelites survived their long journey through the desert, through the ordeals and the sufferings that they sustained. And Deuteronomy chapter 8 in Ekev this morning notes, "Your clothing did not wear out on you, nor did your foot swell these 40 years. They survived hardships, and these extraordinarily charming details allows the Israelites to be reminded, and us all these centuries later, that all they had to do was to keep going. The portion ends with God. The God we know who generally doesn't speak with such gentleness, speaking of second chances. And the portion that we will hear has God beginning saying to Moses, come up, come back up to the mountain, bring 2 new tablets and bring them ready for me with an ark that you have prepared so that I can write on them in the way I wrote on the first. They will be the same tablets, but perhaps even better, because as Torah is teaching us, as have many other teachers since, it is important always to have another go. And that is the passage and learning we make in life. No detail is given of Moses' anger of the first breaking, but what we do know is that the broken shards of those first tablets live in the same ark as the new set of tablets, all together, the failures and the success. And that is what we are in our lives, an ark, a home for all our attempts, the ones that succeed easily and the ones that do not. And then what does Moses say? What does God say to Moses after the tablets have been brought up? After God, we're told, commentators have a blast with this, saying God actually had quite good handwriting and spent quite a lot of time. Beverly would approve of clarity, easy to read, and that's what God apparently gave to us. So what does God say? God asks Moses and says, you've been here a while, now get up, kum, stand up, return to your job of leading the people, of literally standing in front of them. Kum lech lamasa lifnei ha'am. Get up, go back to leading in front of the people. We have been together 40 days and 40 nights, and now is the time for you to keep going and get back to the task you have. Always the chance to do it again. How can we resist this message in Torah to not extrapolate and bring it into our own lives? That is what our lives are like, and we know it. The older we are, we know. We survive. We try again and again and again. And we need this reminder now. Why? Because we are in the cycle, as Alan Lew suggested. The countdown now of 5 weeks, musicians, until Rosh Hashanah. And here, just last week's portion of Deuteronomy, Va'et Hanan, the word that is repeated 7 times is the root fana, to turn. When God says, Rav Lachem, the time is right for you. Turn, funu, begin your journey. And so Torah tells, we turned. Vanefen, we passed by the way of the wilderness of Moab. We turned and we turned again. We keep on turning in our lives. We keep on going, we keep on trying, and that is what sanctifies our lives and our living and gives us strength and the ability to keep going. I have to end with Beckett as I began. Beckett, we know, came to believe that failure was an essential part of anyone's life. Of course, he was particularly concerned with artists, but I like to think it extends to all humankind. His best known expressions of this philosophy appear at the end of his novel of 1953, The Unnamable, where he writes at the end, you must go on. I can't go on. I'll go on. That's what the Israelites are described as doing today, and what we in all our different lives, I am sure, keep doing most days, so that, as he wrote 30 years later in 1983 in the story Worswood Ho, ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. For us, may we manage this. Amen. So now may I ask you to come up ready to open the ark and for us to move to Kriyat Torah, to the Torah service. We're on page 480.
Come on. עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
אחד אלוהינו, גדול אדוננו, קדוש שמו.
Gadlu l'Adonai iti onoramama shomo yachdav.
לך אדוני הגדולה, הגבורה והתפארת, והנצח וההוד. כל בשמיים ובארץ, לך אדוני הממלכה, והמתנשא בכל דרוש.
This is very confusing for us, isn't it? The first time we've brought the Torah over to this side, but we can cope with change. We can cope. Wonderful. Thanks, Barry. Very confusing. Very confusing. Dean, are you reading Torah? Thank you. Now all we need is to have a different tune for Adon Olam this morning than we're used to, and that would throw us all off, right? So we are in chapter 10 of Deuteronomy. Those of you at home, I'm sure you have Josie's Torah script in front of you. If you want to follow in a Chumash, I can't tell you the page number, but Beverly might in a minute, but it's chapter 10, but I'll translate. And now listen out. Pesel is to carve. Listen out. Ark is Aaron. Listen out for the Kum, where God has told Moses to get up and return and carry on. So this morning, I really, how can I not say how proud and delighted I am that my daughter turns 18 today and is choosing to celebrate with us by coming up and blessing the Torah on this auspicious moment for her and for me. I now have an 18-year-old daughter. Ta'amod Elisheva bat Rivka v'Chaim levarech et haTorah. Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach. Baruch Adonai hamavorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamavorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten
haTorah. Amen. Ba'et hahu amar Adonai Eli pasal lecha shnei luchot havanim karishonim va'ala elai hahara va'asita lecha Aaron eitz va'echtov al haluchot et hadvarim asher hayu al haluchot harishonim asher shibarta v'samtem ba'aron va'es Aaron atzei shitim ve'efsol shnei luchot avanim karishonim shnei luchot avanim karishonim va'al hahara v'shnei haluchot biyadi vayichtov al haluchot kamichtav harishon et aseret hadvarim asher diber Adonai elechem Baha mitoch ha'esh, betoch ha'kahal. Vayitnem Adonai Elai, ba'afen, ba'ered, min ha'har, ba'asem et haluchot, ba'aron asher asiti. I'm going to translate this part so that we really capture. So at this time, God spoke to me. This is, of course, Moses. So at this time, God spoke to me, saying, carve for yourself 2 tablets of stone, just like the first ones, and come up to me on the mountain, and make for yourself as well a wooden ark. And I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, and then in a slightly passive aggressive way, you know, the ones that you broke, and put them in the ark. And now here's Moses responding. So I made the ark of cedar wood, and I carved 2 tablets of stone, just like the first ones, and I went up the mountain with the 2 tablets in my hand. The details are amazing. And God wrote on the tablets the same wording, the same missive that was on the first tablets, the 10 sayings that God spoke to you of on the mountain, out of the fire, on the day of the great assembly. And then God gave them to me, and I took them and I brought them down from the mountain, and I put the tablets in the ark that I had made. Vayu sham ka'asher tzivani Adonai, uvnei Yisrael nasu beret v'nei Ya'akan Mosara Sham met Aharon, v'yikaver Sham, v'yikahen Elazar bano tachta. Misham nasu Hagad Goda, umin Hagad Goda Yotveta Eretz Nachale Mayim. Be'etahu Hivdil Adonai et Shevet Halevi, Leseit et Aaron, Brit Adonai, La'amot Lifnei Adonai, Lesharto, Ulavarech Bishmo, Ad Hayom Hazeh. Al Kain Lo Haya, Leleve Chelek, V'na'achala, Am Echad, Adonai hu nachalato, ka'asher diber Adonai Elohecha lo, va'anochi amadati bahar kayamim harishonim, 40 yom va'arba'im laila, va'yishma Adonai Eli, gam ba'pa'am hahi, lo ava Adonai hishchitacha, v'yomar Adonai Elai, kum lecha lemasa lifnei ha'am, v'yavo'u v'yirshu et ha'aretz asher nishbati le'avotam letet lahem. So they all, and so it came to pass, everything that God commanded me to do. And the children of Israel journeyed from Beret, Bnei Ya'akan, towards Mossah, and there Aaron died, and he was buried. And Eleazar, his son, acted as priest on his behalf instead of him. And from there, the children of Israel journeyed from Gud Gadah, and from Gud Gadah, they moved on to Yatveta, which was a land full of flowing streams and brooks. And at that time, God separated out the tribe of the Levites in order that they should carry the Ark of the Covenant, and that they should stand before God and serve God and bless God, and bless with God's name, which they do until this day, which of course is the right of Kohanim and Levites to bless in the way that we know is traditional. Al Ken, so it was that the Levites did not inherit a portion of inheritance amongst the people like their brothers did. Rather, God was their inheritance and their portion, just as the Eternal One, your God, had told them to do. And I stood up on the mountain, and I stood there and was there just like the first days, the exact same time I stood on the mountain, 40 days and 40 nights. And God listened to me this time as well as last time. And God did not destroy all of you, meaning after the sin of the golden calf. And God then said to me, come on, get up, go back to leading your people from in front of your people, go back to them and allow them to come in and to inherit the land that I have sworn and promised to their ancestors in order to give to them. Baruch
אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו.
Baruch אתה אדוני נותן התורה. Amen. Yeshua Koach. You can go. Let us stand. And Barry is going to raise the scroll.
Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah. Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah. Le'amo Yisrael v'kedushato. Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Amenu. Amenu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'yishamaru Be'ar Kosho. Amenu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'yishamaru Be'ar Kosho. Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Amenu. Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Amenu. Amenu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'yishamaru Be'ar Kosho.
I'd like to call up Beverly, who will be reading Haftarah for us. in honour of her mum's first yard site this year and before her stone setting next weekend. This list.
Sorry, too short. Yeah, so Isaiah is the fifth book of the prophets, made up from two different Isaiahs. The first Isaiah lived before the destruction of the temple by the Babylonians and warned the Israelites about their behaviour. From verse 40 onwards is attributed to the second Isaiah, an unknown poet or preacher who lived about 100 years later in exiles in Babylon. The Boney M song by the Rivers of Babylon does come to mind here, but I will not go into it. At some point, his words were added to the first Isaiah and one book was created. At the start, Isaiah rebukes Israel for abandoning God and pursuing corruption, warning of the nation's downfall. But the last third of the book contains comforting prophecies about returning to Jerusalem and redemption. I'm reading chapter 50, verse 1 to chapter 51, verse 3. And when I first read it, it was very confused. This is the second Haftarah of consolation, and they are chosen primarily for their message of comfort and hope during these weeks following the fast of Av. But it is quite hard to understand and interpret because it is full of religious depth. In the Sedra this week, Ekev, Israel's duty to maintain its spiritual identity in the face of the Canaanite idolatry is discussed, and that people need to understand that the divine discipline of suffering for their role as a servant of the Lord is divine, and explained by Isaiah in his prophecies. The portion we have just read gives that message of hope and the ability to rebuild and move forward. At the start of this Haftarah, the children of Israel doubt their covenant relationship with God still exists. But Isaiah asks them, where is the evidence of this? As there is no proof of divorce, and therefore Israel is still Israel, and they will be restored. The portion continues describing how people will suffer for their faith, ending up with the reminder to remember God's promise to Abraham to make them great and make the dry lands fertile. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim, v'ratzah v'devreihem henemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher b'torah, uv'Moshe avdo, uv'Yisrael amo, uv'nvi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek. Where is your mother's bill of divorce, which I sent her away? Asked the Eternal One. Which of my creditors has it to whom I sold you? You were sold because of your own sins, for your transgressions your mother was sent away. Why, when I came, was no one there, no one to answer when I called? Is my hand really too weak to redeem? Do I lack the power to save? With my rebuke I dry up the sea and turn rivers into desert. Fish stink from lack of water and die on parched ground. I shroud the skies in blackness and make their clothing sackcloth. The eternal God has taught me how to speak, even to those tired of speech. Morning by morning, God awakens my ear, teaching me to listen. The eternal God opened my ear, and I did not rebel, I did not turn away. I gave my back to those who beat me, my cheeks to those who tore out my hair. I did not hide my face from insult and spitting. For the eternal God will help me, and therefore I feel no disgrace, but have set my face like flint, knowing that I shall not be put to shame. My champion is near me. Who dare contend with me? Let us stand together to be judged. Who are my adversaries? Let them confront me. With the eternal God to help me, who can declare me wrong? They shall wear out like a garment like moth-eaten cloth. Who among you reveres the eternal and respects the words of God's servant? Who walks in darkness, though he has no light? Who trusts the eternal and leans upon God? But you, all of you who kindle your own fire, who set torches alight, go walk by the blaze of your fire, by the torches you have lit. This comes to you from my hand. You shall lie down in pain. Listen to me, all who pursue justice, all who seek the eternal. Look to the rock from which you were hewn, the quarry from which you were cut. Look back to Abraham your father and Sarah who bore you. When I called him, he was alone, but I blessed him and made him many. Just so the Eternal will comfort Zion, comforting all her ruins, making her wilderness like Eden, her desert like the Eternal's garden, where joy and gladness are found, thanksgiving and the strains of song. Al ha-Torah va'al ha'avodah va'al hanvi'im va'al yom ha-Shabbat hazeh. Shnatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu likdusha v'limnucha l'chavod ultifaret. Al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach v'mvarachim otach. Yitbarach shimcha b'fi kol chai tamid le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai makadesh ha-Shabbat. Amen.
Amen. Beautifully read. So well explained. You've given us much food for thought. Be careful your head. All these weeks of consolation. Thank you. So we now go straight to our community prayers that will be read by Valerie, also to honor her mother on her yahrzeit, Kay's yahrzeit. Let's stand as we hold the Torah.
Eternal God, we ask your blessing on our Queen Elizabeth and all the royal family, as well as those who govern our country. Guide them and all who govern them with the spirit of wisdom and compassion, so that they care for the citizen and the stranger and bring benefit to all the inhabitants of our land and the world. Bless all our brothers and sisters of the house of Israel. Bless our congregation and its members. Be with those who seek your presence and all who are in need of healing, spiritual or physical. Let them know that you are near to comfort and sustain them. May peace exist in the state of Israel soon and in our time. May you, eternal God, grant blessing to her, established as an age-old dream and home to the oppressed. May its leaders and citizens be inspired by a faithfulness to the aims of its founders, and may the country be imbued with the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice always. May this Shabbat renew our energy to build and sustain a better world and to deepen our gratitude of so much that surrounds us. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. Yeshua. So as we prepare to put the scroll away, page 486, Yehalelu et Shem Adonai ki nizgav shamo lavado.
Odo haaretz v'shamayim v'yaren keren le'amo tehila l'chol chasidav livnei Yisrael am karovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Behold, a good doctrine has been given you. Do not forsake it. The words above our own Aaron, our own ark. Eitz Chaim hi lamachazikim ba. It is a tree of life to those who hold it fast, and all who cling to it will find happiness. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace.
Ashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Kadesh yameinu kegeder Kadesh yameinu kegeder.
Let's go straight to Aleinu on page 520.
Aleinu leshabeach ha'adon ha'kol, ha'tev gedulah v'yotzer l'rishi, asher sam yodenu v'yaged et shemo, v'torah aleinu lehamim malchuto.
to Kaddish, and to those who are mourning or remembering a yahrzeit. We think particularly in our congregation of the death of David Melcher, father of Alan, grandfather to Jem, Abby, and Leah. Zichrono levracha, may his memory be for a blessing. And the yahrzeits that fall this Shabbat, we think particularly of Kata Wall, aunt of Leslie Urbach, of Kay Wolfe, mother of Valerie Joseph, grandmother of Jacqueline, of Rose Khan, mother of Barry J., of Sandra Sulkin, mother of Elizabeth Sulkin, and of Cynthia Elf, mother, just thinking of her stone setting this weekend and of how poignant and tricky that first yahrzeit is, thinking so much of Beverly and of Ian and Natasha and the memories that will accompany this first moment of the end of the first year. Zichrona levracha, may her memory be for a blessing, and may all those who remember their loved ones feel comforted in their loss as we say the words of the Kaddish with them. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shamei rabbah, v'yama divrach yurte v'yamlich malchute, v'hayachon uv'yomechon, v'haye dochol beit Yisrael, v'agalav izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam omer maya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'av v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitada v'yitale v'talal shemed kudusha brichu, leila min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbahata v'nechemata, da'amiram v'yama v'imru amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shamaya, v'hayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol b'nei adam v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol b'nei adam v'imru amen. Sit down as we prepare for Kiddush, but let us sing Adonai. Surprise us.
Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra li'et nasa v'chetzochon azay melech shemo nikra v'acharei kiktot hakol levado imlok nora v'hu hayam v'hu oveh v'hu yihyeh b'tifara v'hu echad ve'en sheni להמשיל לו להכבירה בלי ראשית בלי תכלית ולא העוז והמשרה והוא אלי וחי גואלי וצוחב לי בעת צרה והוא ניסי ומנוס לי וננוס לי ביום אקרא ידו אבקיד רוחי והייתי שם בעירה ועם רוחי בביאתי אדוני בי ולא אירא.
So as we go into Kiddush, just a reminder for us, our text that offers us on page 529, if you want to follow these blessings as we go into Kiddush. Let's stand, only if you're comfortable doing. Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. Eternal God, grant strength to your people. Eternal God, bless your people with peace and with the tenacity and strength that we need to keep going even when things are not easy. And may that be God's will. And let us say, Amen.
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, l'dorotam berit olam, beini uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti le'olam, ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai, et ha-shamayim ve'et haaretz, uvayom hashvi shavat vayinafash. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Amen. And Hamotzi for us. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat shalom, everyone, and wishing you all long life, those of you who are remembering, and strength for the upcoming events and rituals. Shabbat shalom.